When it comes to the guitars that John Mayer has played throughout his career, particularly the Stratocasters, you'd think of the Black One and the 64 as being the two most important. However, there is a third Strat that I really believe belongs right up there with those two in terms of its sheer importance to John Mayer's career, the just countless performances that are so incredible with it, and the just really beautiful tone of this guitar. A guitar that when I first saw John playing Who Did You Think I Was from the Where the Light Is album, I just went, whoa, okay, I never knew a guitar could sound like this, and it sent me down a whole different gear and just musical path. This video is dedicated to that very guitar, one of the most iconic Mayer guitars to me of all time, the Monterey Stratocaster. Alright, so first off, a little bit of background information on the origins of the specific guitar that John Mayer is playing. In 1997, the Fender Custom Shop did a limited run of guitars paying in tribute to the Stratocaster that Jimi Hendrix burned at the Monterey Pop Music Festival. They produced 210 of these very guitars, and now today, they are just absolutely absurdly valuable, just crazy collector's pieces. There's one for sale on Reverb right now. I'll throw up a screenshot of the listing just for crazy amounts of money these things go for. And Emerald City Guitars 2 years ago did a really great video going over one of these guitars when it came through their store. You can hear examples of it being played very, very brilliantly. It sounds fantastic. Some more details and really great shots of one of the production models that Fender made, because the one that John is playing isn't actually a production model, but it is a prototype. And of course, this brings up the question, well, how similar is John's prototype to these production versions? And at least cosmetically, what's most noticeable is the absence of the Jimi Hendrix sticker that's on the production versions on John's prototype. Now, the sticker is really cool. It shows Hendrix actually burning the Monterey Stratocaster. They're individually numbered out of 210 as well. So for a collector's piece, I do think it is very cool. However, on John's, it not having that, I just think makes for a lot of a cleaner look, at least in my opinion. And then for the actual specifications of John's prototype, it's pretty safe to assume that they are going to be very close, if not identical, to the production versions. 7¼ inch radius, rosewood fingerboard, bird's eye maple neck, alder body, hand-wound Abbey 65s, and then of course, hand painted by Pam Molina as well, which that's a lot of this guitar. Is just how beautiful and how striking that paint job and aesthetic really is. It just makes this guitar really stand out. And so there's been no word if John has ever changed the pickups in the prototype, but I do kind of lend to believe that they are probably just those hand-wound Abbey 65s. Now, it is worth mentioning that even though the guitar that John has used consistently live is a prototype of these Monterey Custom Shop Stratocasters, John does appear to own at least one of the production models, as seen in this really just interesting shot of John in a room with some guitars on the wall. There is one of those production models there that you do see, so it's worth just pointing out that he does have one of the production ones too. And while we don't know if John changed the pickups in the Monterey Stratocaster, we do know that he did modify the neck of it. During a behind-the-scenes backstage kind of video that John did during the Battle Studies era, he brings out the Monterey and mentions that he had the neck redone and changed it to have Brazilian rosewood for the fingerboard, and then had the back of the neck sanded down as well.
Oh, it's in here. Strat I play on, Waiting on the World to Change, Monterey Strat. Had the neck redone with the Brazilian rosewood fretboard. Had the back sanded down so it doesn't have a gloss on it. I like guitars that have the back sanded down. Like that's a production model, signature model, but
Hold on.
I had the custom shop.
You good?
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, we have no exact timeline as to when these modifications were done to the neck of the Monterey, but I believe it was pretty early on in John owning it. I've tried to take a look at inconsistencies in the actual rosewood on the guitar and any real strong photos that we have, and it, to me at least, looks completely identical, like the grain and everything, and in a lot of early footage as well of John with the guitar, like really early on, you can see that the neck was clearly sanded down. So I believe these changes were probably made right after John got it, but it's kind of hard to say. Maybe something in terms of it being a prototype, then John wanting to get it up to actually being a full-on touring and studio guitar. And speaking of getting the guitar ready for live use, the live debut of John's prototype Monterey Stratocaster was on December 28th of 2003 at Irving Plaza with Buddy Guy and Double Trouble. I haven't been able to find any actual footage of this debut performance, but there are some shots from like Getty Images where you see John with the guitar. Now, the real kind of wider audience debut of John with the guitar was just 2 days later on Conan on December 30th, and he performed again with Buddy Guy and Double Trouble for Come Back to Bed, and we do have some footage of this performance. Now, 2004 is a hard year to talk about just in general when it comes to John Mayer's gear because there's not a lot of footage out there at all of him playing, shots of his gear, things like that. It's a really difficult year to actually kind of talk about in all honesty, but there are a few performances that I want to highlight in this specific video. There is the 46th Grammy Music Care Person of the Year Awards show, which was done to honor Sting. John did perform with the Monterey. We have a couple of photos of him with the guitar from that specific performance. And then on May 12th of 2004, there was this private Rolling Stones party that John performed at as well. It's just kind of two performances in the first bit of 2004 that I want to highlight of John using it. Otherwise, for the main Heavier Things tour, really the Monterey, as far as everything I can tell, didn't see any use at all. Skipping the bulk of 2004 now to December 6th, and John would perform at the Viper Room, and this show is just so important because it was the live debut of the Black One. So it's definitely worth mentioning that for the show that John would, showcase the Black One off to the world in its very, original form, the way it looks aesthetically without any of that natural wear that John did to the guitar. Pretty quickly, go watch my Black One documentary that I made if you want to know about that in more detail. But just want to note that at this very important show within John Mayer gear history, the Monterey Strat was also used. At the end of 2004, on December 28th and 29th, John would perform two shows called John Mayer Blues at Webster Hall, and where, as they were aptly named, he would play the blues. And it was quite the departure from the music that John was really known for playing, especially coming off of the Heavier Things tour. He would perform some Stevie Ray Vaughan covers, a lot of Hendrix, and Come Back to Bed was kind of his own song that he added into the mix. And these shows were very much the beginning, the kind of like first steps towards the John Mayer trio. John actually performing a lot of these more bluesy songs, focusing on guitar playing. And what's really cool about this performance is that this is the first grouping of shows that Rene Martinez actually was John's guitar tech at. And there's a bit of an interesting story behind this, and even the gear that John was using in some of these shots that you guys are seeing here. Shout out to my friend Tommy, who has supplied part of these shots because he was at one of these shows. You see like a combo ODS, which I think this is the only actual show we've ever seen John using a combo overdrive special at. Some different pedals than you're used to seeing him use. It's just a really interesting show in time, and there is some footage of one of the performances of Come Back to Bed, but one of the main guitars that John would use for these shows was the Monterey Strat, and just a very interesting point in John's career where he's shifting focus from being that singer-songwriter to focusing on the guitar playing, and really, you know, this all kind of you could trace back from Continuum as being a real big starting point for the inspiration to what would become that album. All right, so it's at this point we can move on to the actual John Mayer Trio era in 2005, and there's a really cool video that exists of just John Mayer Trio rehearsal footage where John, Steve, and Pino are practicing Good Love Is on the Way, they're rehearsing Who Did You Think I Was, and the guitar that John uses throughout the entire video is the Monterey Stratocaster, and it's just really great footage, and I'll play a little bit of it for you guys. Now, this whole rehearsal footage from the trio is super interesting. It was kind of one of those things that no one really knew existed until it just was kind of uploaded to YouTube like 2 years ago. If you guys want to see me do a video talking about this footage and some of the kind of interesting things that are in it, let me know in the comments down below. But with the John Mayer Trio, we'd get the wider use of the Monterey Stratocaster. However, John was really experimenting with a lot of Strats at this time. The black one really saw its primary initial live use during the John Mayer Trio era. There would be the John Cruz Masterbuilt 62 Sonic Blue Stratocaster that John would be using a lot. You'd also see him using the Stratocaster. There were a lot of guitars that were revolving at this point, and it kind of, to me, almost just based on that, seemed like John was maybe trying to find his real #1 Strat at the time of the John Mayer Trio era. But live, primarily, you'd see John using the Monterey Stratocaster for performances of Who Did You Think I Was?
Who did you think I was? You won't understand.
But what is kind of interesting is that John did use the Monterey Strat for the live studio performance and music video for Who Did You Think I Was, which then also leads into question, well, did he use it for the actual studio recording for Who Did You Think I Was? We don't know for 100% certainty, but it's definitely, you know, brings into question that, well, John has had that pattern of using guitars live that he uses for the studio quite a lot, and for Who Did You Think I Was, the Monterey Strat is kind of that guitar. There were other guitars that did see use live for that song as well, but the fact that he used it for the music video, I think, really strongly indicates that it is probably the guitar that was used for the studio performance as well. Moving on for the John Mayer Trio era, of course, we have Continuum, and the Monterey Strat was present during the recording sessions of Continuum. There's a really great photo of John holding the guitar. You also see it among a lot of other guitars, but it's kind of front and center, so it is pretty likely that this guitar was featured, at least in some capacity, on Continuum. Now, as I mentioned, John is really a big fan of using guitars live that he used in the studio, and this guitar very quickly became the Waiting on the World to Change guitar. And John, even in that Jones Beach video where he talks about the Brazilian rosewood sanding down the neck, he mentions this is the Waiting on the World to Change guitar. That's really what the Monterey Strat was. It was used for a lot of things during the Continuum era, but Waiting on the World to Change is really that's the song of that guitar, really. And so I do personally believe that this is the guitar that John used in the studio for Waiting on the World to Change. On October 30th of 2006, we have what I think is a fairly underrated live Mayer performance, and it's at the Chapel in Melbourne, Australia. John uses the Monterey Strat for like Waiting on the World to Change, but what does really stand out to me personally is the performance of it for Good Love Is on the Way. It's one of my favorite Mayer tones ever, and really the one that I personally try and go for as one of my reference points. It's like, to me, it's that perfect blend of the kind of raw, gritty, trio tone, but then also the more polished and refined and just brilliant tone of Continuum. To me, it sits almost slightly somewhere in there. It's not quite like Where the Light Is tone, but it's not trio tone either. It's somewhere in the middle, at least in my opinion, and this performance of Good Love Is on the Way just is right up there for me personally in terms of those Mayer reference tones.
Thank you very much.
And in 2007, we have Where the Light Is, and the Monterey Strat is heavily featured throughout Where the Light Is. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, one of the performances that really changed just my musical journey, my gear journey, was the performance of Who Did You Think I Was with this guitar. I was a kid watching, the acoustic set and thinking, okay, yeah, neon is crazy, but like I'm more into the electric thing. And then the trio portion of the night it just changed everything for me. And then to really seal it off was when the Slow Dancing in the Burning Room performance came on. And it was just like, all right, I want to get a Strat now. I want to get like a clean Fender guitar. Like, I want to dive into this whole thing when I was pretty young. And both of those two performances that really resonated with me were with the Monterey Stratocaster. So to me, at least in my gear journey, John with this guitar is pretty special. So throughout Continuum, the Monterey Strat would be heavily used by John primarily for Waiting on the World to Change and Slow Dancing in a Burning Room. You would have other guitars, of course, in the mix as well. John really rotating Stratocasters pretty heavily at this point. The Gold Leaf would always come out for Vultures. The 64 Strat was kind of in the mix, but it would come and go a little bit. Mainly was used a little earlier on in the Continuum era, but then the black one, of course, was used for a ton of shows as well. The Continuum era was just cool because you saw John changing guitars so frequently. I just love that about these kind of earlier Mayer eras, as he had a lot of specific guitars for certain songs, and their unique characteristics were allowed to shine and help to create the sound of those songs. So anyways, Continuum, moving on now to heavier things. And heavier things, you saw a little bit more stability in terms of the guitars that John was using. He wasn't switching Strats, at least, quite as often. The black one was very, very heavily used. But then as well, you have the master-built Jeff Beck Stratocaster that would kind of take over for, you know, songs John would perform every night, like Heartbreak Warfare and Crossroads, pretty much. The Monterey Strat, though, would stay around for Waiting on the World to Change, keeping within that theme of being the Waiting on the World to Change guitar.
We're still waiting on the world to change.
And in 2009, we have one of my favorite John Mayer performances of just all time, and it's California Dreamin' live on Conan. The tone from this performance, the playing, everything is just superb. He also would perform California Dreamin' again with the trio on New Year's Eve of 2009. That footage I know I can play for you guys. The audio I can only play from the Conan performance, but these are just two very much, in my opinion, highlight performances with the Monterey Strat.
California dreaming on such a winter's day.
And in 2009, there are two more performances that I want to highlight. The first was on August 9th at the Troubadour, and it was dubbed The Secret Show, and where John actually posted about the show the day of, saying, hey, I'm going to be playing at the Troubadour. Tickets are like $20. Come and see me play. And this was right in the middle of the Battle Study sessions. He actually finished Perfectly Lonely's lyrics in the dressing room before live debuting it at this show. But John did perform with the Monterey. This is just a really special performance. It was with Steve Jordan and Pino Palladino, so even though it wasn't billed as a John Mayer Trio show, it was, let's be honest. So just a cool moment. And we have a few shots that are courtesy of my friend Jesse, who's Jesse's Guitar Lounge on Instagram, has owned a few different dumbbells that John has owned first and then now are in his possession, or he has owned and then John has purchased off of him. A very great Instagram page. Go and check Jesse out if you haven't already. But these shots are from him and he was actually at that show. So just a kind of cool piece of Mayer history around the Battle Studies era. And then, as I mentioned, at the end of 2009 with that California Dreamin' performance on New Year's Eve, on December 29th, John also performed in San Diego with the trio, and there is a decently rare performance of Every Day I Have the Blues, and this might be the only time John has performed this song on the Monterey. So just some additional footage that I wanted to share from 2009 for you guys. And in 2010, there is one highlight performance featuring this guitar where John would perform Who Did You Think I Was? Just solo, just himself, playing the entire song. It's really awesome. And this is just another cool example of John just with this guitar doing the trio thing, but it's just him. It's really unique. It's really cool. Crossroads 2010 is a pretty great performance with Who Did You Think I Was and Ain't No Sunshine, but what a lot of you guys might not know is that Wait Till Tomorrow was actually part of John's setlist with the Monterey Strat. It just didn't make the official final cut, and no professional footage as far as I'm aware exists. So now we are moving along to the dual era of Born and Raised and Paradise Valley 2013-2014. At this time, the Monterey Strat was still used for Waiting on the World to Change. There's Pink Pop, Made in America, 2 professionally shot live full-on, concert performances you can go and watch. You'll see the Monterey Strat featured there. Some other great footage of it used for that song online just from general shows as well. There's one other kind of interesting thing with the Monterey from this time frame though, and it's that it was used for a couple performances of Something Like Olivia. Something Like Olivia is a really weird one almost because John, I'm not sure if he just was having fun experimenting with different guitars or if he just wasn't sure what guitar sounded the best for that song, but it was kind of like a revolving door of different guitars, different Strats, different just in general guitars that you see him use for that song, but there were a couple of performances that did feature the Monterey.
Something like Olivia. I keep thinking something like Olivia. What I need, I keep thinking that something like Olivia. What I need, I keep thinking that something like Olivia. What I need to find.
And during that same show where that Something Like Olivia footage that I just played for you guys is from in Lincoln, Nebraska on November 22nd, John also used the Monterey for a performance of the outro solo of Queen of California, one of my favorite songs off of Born and Raised, and I just have to show this to you guys because it might as well be one of the only times John's ever used this guitar for Queen of California, and as it's one of my favorite songs, I just wanted to play some of that solo for you guys as well because I just think it's cool. Okay, so now let's talk 2015. This was a big year for John because it is the very first year of Dead & Company, and you might be surprised that I'm even mentioning Dead & Company in this video, but there is one example of John actually using the Monterey Strat with Dead & Company, and it's for Dark Star on November 1st of 2015. This was sent to me by Gabe Bergman. You guys all know my friend Gabe. He's a big expert on Dead & Company and that stuff, and when we were just chatting about me when I was doing the research to make this video, he was like, oh, I got one performance for you that you'll want to add in there. And as far as him and I both know from watching a ton of footage and everything, it's the only time John's used this guitar with Dead & Company. All right, so moving along in our timeline now to 2017, the Search for Everything era is beginning. John would share a photo to his Instagram, Facebook with the caption, "Yeah, it's really groovy," with the Monterey Stratocaster in studio. So to me, this is kind of clear indication that in some capacity, this guitar is featured on the Search for Everything, which is genuinely one of my favorite John Mayer albums. I feel like it might be a tad underrated among the community, at least. That's just, what I think. I really love that record, so it's really cool just to know from John that this guitar was with them during some of the late studio sessions, I'm assuming, for the album at the very least. And in 2017, we have the Search for Everything World Tour, the very first tour I ever actually saw John on. And the Monterey Strat was heavily featured on this tour. However, it wasn't the Waiting on the World to Change guitar for once. It wasn't that guitar. It was, however, the E-flat guitar that John would use for all of the Hendrix covers during the John Mayer Trio setlist portion of the night on that tour. I saw it for Bold as Love, and it's kind of crazy when I did just some research. John's only performed Bold as Love 25 times. Only 25 times. I thought it was a lot more than that, mainly because I guess of it being featured on Where the Light Is, but he's only performed it, 25 times, and I've seen one of them with the Monterey. Pretty cool. Here's some footage from that night. And as we get to the end of 2017 and the Search for Everything World Tour, we have the October 27th performance in Rio de Janeiro. This would be the last time we would see John with the Monterey Strat for quite a few years. In 2017, during this tour as well, the Silver Sky was born and unveiled, and then that slowly kind of took over as John's main go-to Strat style of guitar, as we all know. So this performance right here would be the very last time we see John with this guitar for a handful of years. But I'm very happy to say that on March 9th of 2023, with the Love Rocks John Mayer Trio performance, we would get treated to seeing this guitar in John's hands again in the same configuration as we saw it during the Search for Everything tour in E-flat for the Hendrix sort of thing. And this performance of Wait Till Tomorrow, the tone especially, is phenomenal. John stacking TS10 into Clone Centaur into TS10. It's just brilliant. And then this brings us along to Crossroads 2023. On September 23rd, we have another John Mayer Trio performance of Wait Till Tomorrow. And this, at the time of me making this video, is the very last time we've seen John with the Monterey Stratocaster in his hands. And I hope we see it again very, very soon. But let's take a listen to this performance before we close out the video. And that concludes the story of John Mayer's Monterey Pop prototype Stratocaster. Like I mentioned in this video, this guitar is pretty special to me, at least just that connection when I was a kid, seeing John with this guitar, and it changed everything in my music guitar playing gear journey. So it's always been special to me, and it's been a long time coming, me making this video, this kind of, mini documentary, if you will, on this guitar, to the best of my ability at least. And I know a lot of you guys have been asking for this video too, so I really do hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts on this guitar, what your favorite performance is with it. And until the next video, guys, thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the end of this one. And if there's another guitar that you want to see me do just an ultra deep dive on, let me know down in the comments below. I've done the black one, John's Crossroads 335, the Tele Strat Hybrid, the 64, the SRV Signature. I've done a lot of guitars in this long for ultra deep dive mini documentary format, but if there's one that I haven't done one on yet, let me know if you want to see it featured on the channel, and I'll do my best to research it, take the time in to compile a video like this. These ones do take a very long time to do, so I hope you guys can understand if it takes me a little bit to get to it. But again, until the next video, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.